Time for checking in on the waiver wire for Week 8, presented by Snickers. Rookie mistake, maybe you just need a Snickers. We're getting a look at FFT's top 5 players to add. Cade Otton, we know the tight end position has been really rough this season. He is rostered in 40% of leagues. Tyler Lockett, also Tua making the list, who has been on the IR for the last 4 weeks, expecting him to come back and play. If he does clear concussion protocol and all goes well, he'll be playing on Sunday against the Cardinals. We have our fantasy experts, Jamie Eisenberg and Dave Richard, to walk us through the Week 8 waiver wire. Gentlemen, we know when we listen to you, we tend to win our fantasy league. So tell us what's up for the waiver wire for Week 8.
It's a bad week for wide receivers, Jacqueline. It's a tough week for the Buccaneers, losing Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Hopefully Evans is back soon, but the Godwin injury is going to be tough for a lot of fantasy managers to overcome. You have Brandon Ayuk out with his knee injury. He's going to miss the remainder of the season. DK Metcalf's dealing with a knee injury. It's just a bad spot right now for the wide receivers. Thankfully, no team's on a bye, but there are some wide receiver holes that you have to fill on your roster. Let's take a look at some of the priorities that we're looking at here at the players you want to add. And Jauan Jennings seems like the most obvious add if, in fact, we're not going to have Ayuk for the rest of the season, and potentially Deebo Samuel. We don't know when he's going to return, dealing with pneumonia. He's got fluid in his lungs. Hopefully he can play in Week 8, but they do have a bye in Week 9. So we may not see Deebo Samuel for this week and then for next week. So Jennings has an opportunity to step up, play a bigger role. Jalen McMillan helping the Bucs in their situation. Sterling Shepard could also be someone you want to look at. Tyler Lockett is replacing DK Metcalf, potentially. He's week to week, which in the NFL these days means he's playing the following week, but we'll have to see what happens and how long Metcalf is out. Demario Douglas, Jalen Tolbert, these guys have put up good numbers of late, and Dontavian Wicks, part of that very crowded but also very successful Packers wide receiver core. You see the rest of the names here, and you can read them all in the column on CBSSports.com. So let's talk about the 49ers, because it's not just Ayuk, who we know is lost for the season. You got Deebo Samuel, had to go to the hospital Sunday night. George Kittle's also dealing with a foot injury, and there is no Christian McCaffrey to help in the passing game. So is Jennings the easy #1 wide receiver to go pick up this week?
On the Niners or overall? It doesn't matter. The answer is yes, because we've seen it from Jauan Jennings before, and I think he will get an opportunity to play in 2 wide receiver sets when Deebo Samuel is healthy. And Pearsall, it was his first game, so maybe we give him a pass for it, Jamie, but he wasn't separating like I saw him separate in college and at the Senior Bowl. And that's not what I was hoping to see. And listen, Pearsall's been through a lot, but Jauan Jennings has also been through a lot with the Niners, and he's been there with Purdy. He knows what's going to be asked of him. I would expect him to be the one who benefits the most from Brandon Ayuk being out for the rest of the year.
And you saw the graphic. He's also dealing with a hip injury. He did not play in Week 7, but Kyle Shanahan saying they're hoping to get him back in Week 8. So something to keep in mind there when it comes to Jennings. Okay, the Bucs, just awful situation in the Monday night loss to the Ravens. You saw Evans leave with a hamstring injury, and then Chris Godwin leave with a dislocated ankle, most likely lost for the season. So now we're looking at who's going to step up in their absence. Cade Otton is the most obvious to me, not at the wide receiver position, but at the wide receiver spot. You got Jalen McMillan, who just had 8 targets to lead the team aside from Evans and Godwin. You have Trey Palmer, who could be a part of the wide receiver mix as well. And then Sterling Shepard, to me, is a very interesting dart throw, wild card type of guy, because he's going to probably play in the slot where Godwin has lined up and has become one of the more amazing wide receivers this season, also scoring 5 touchdowns, which is not the norm for him. So, Dave, break down the Bucs wide receivers. Who do you like the best?
The one that I would want to go after first off the waiver wire is McMillan, because of what you talked about. It's a rookie that's got great speed. We saw him play well in college at Washington, has upside. And this is an offense. I know that they've got some great running backs, and maybe they lean on them a little bit more. They're still going to want to throw the ball and attack downfield. And so McMillan makes sense from that standpoint. But I'm not ready to discount Sterling Shepard. I still think his connection, going back to his college days with Baker Mayfield, is something that can be in play. We've seen Sterling Shepard shine before out of the slot, say that 10 times fast, and I wonder if he could end up being kind of like a cheat code for 10 PPR points moving forward. The one other thing to keep in mind, and this is for both McMillan and Shepard, the Bucs could make a trade. They could acquire another wide receiver. They know that Godwin's not coming back. We don't know what the word is with Mike Evans and how much time he will miss. If they add another wide receiver to this mix, it could change everything with this Tampa Bay passing game.
Absolutely. Again, hopefully Evans will not be out for a very long period of time, but it did not look good, and we know hamstring injuries can linger. Let's just go right into Cade Otton, because, again, 10 targets, 6 catches, 100 yards. He's had a good month, and that was with Godwin and Evans on the field. So now you lose those 2 guys. I think he's going to be the guy that Baker leans on in the middle of the field and maybe finds the end zone a little bit more as well. Hunter Henry's had 2 very solid games, an amazing performance against the Jaguars, but 2 solid games with Drake May. Noah Fant could benefit without Metcalf there. And Jatavian Sanders is coming on for the Panthers, somebody that you want to keep an eye on if you miss out on Otten or Hunter Henry. So Dave, is Otten, as we've discussed the last couple of weeks, the tight ends who have either emerged or re-emerged? Do you like Cade Otten better than Evan Ingram, better than David Njoku, better than Jake Ferguson, better than Tucker Kraft, better than a re-emerging Mark Andrews? Like, where does he fall in the pecking order for you of tight ends moving forward?
I feel like he's toward the bottom of the list of the tight ends that you named. I would put him ahead of Mark Andrews, especially if it's half or full PPR. And we think that he's got a chance to really see an uptick in targets now, obviously, without Chris Godwin there. I ran the numbers for this. There are a bunch of tight ends this year that have had at least 6 targets in a game. 70% of those tight ends that have at least 6 targets get at least 10 PPR points. And I think when you look at Cade Otten, you're seeing a tight end that can get at least 6 targets per game. I don't know if you can quite see it with Hunter Henry, but it's really, really close. Those two are my top 2 favorite tight ends to get off the waiver wire. And in many cases, compared to the wide receivers that are available, I'd rather get both of those guys. There are some receivers I'd put in between them, but Otten to me is a priority whether you need a tight end or not.
The only concern with Henry is that his spike in targets from the Texans game to the Jaguars game was with Douglas dealing with an illness, and so Demario Douglas back. Does Hunter Henry get all those same opportunities? And the schedule gets very brutal for Hunter Henry moving forward, starting with this Jets game. But you are seeing a connection here between Drake May and his tight end. Even Austin Hooper had some decent numbers against the Jaguars, but I think that was more about Jacksonville. So just take that into account. But Henry has been productive with the quarterback change, and it's hard to overlook that. So hopefully Hunter Henry continues to produce despite the next 4 games of tough matchups coming up for the Patriots. All right, let's look at the running backs here. It's not the sexiest list of names. Last week we had a lot of running back replacement guys that didn't end up being replacement guys because all of the starters came back. Aaron Jones, James Cook, some of those guys that we spoke about. But in the case of Jalen Warren, you saw a change in the offense, Russell Wilson starting, and Warren looked a little bit better. Also 2 games removed from that knee injury. So when you look at Warren, Dave, is he just an easy guy to get of the running backs who are available? Or do you go after Goodson as a replacement if Jonathan Taylor doesn't play, or even Dearness Johnson, who could have an opportunity to make some plays for the Jaguars if Travis Etienne's out?
I got news for you. I don't know if I'm going after any of these guys. Now, if I'm desperate for a running back, certainly I should, and maybe Dearness Johnson makes the most sense in full PPR because he might be able to get me 8, 9, 10 PPR points as the passing downs running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But this is not a good list whatsoever. Warren is back for the Steelers, and we hope that he can end up taking a lot of work away from Najee Harris. But Cordero Patterson's going to be back for them too. And that just makes it a 3-headed monster. It makes me nervous to trust any Steelers running back not named Najee, because we know that Najee's the one who's running away with the job. And with Jonathan Taylor expected to practice this week, totally turns Tyler Goodson into a pumpkin. If Taylor was going to be out, or if we didn't know that he was going to practice, we'd be singing the praises of Tyler Goodson. I'm glad we know that he's expected to practice. If for some reason Taylor doesn't practice, or we get to Friday and he's out for the game, Tyler Goodson would be at the top of this list.
Okay, just one thing to note. He did score a touchdown. He did play less snaps than Trey Sermon, and both running backs not involved in the passing game with Anthony Richardson. So just keep that in mind for what the Colts running backs look like. Jonathan Taylor is a different animal, but these guys splitting time, no work in the passing game. I loved Goodson 2 weeks ago because he caught 6 passes, did not catch the ball last week, no targets. Just something to keep an eye on there. Let's talk about the quarterbacks here because Tua Tagovailoa is expected to return, and I think he could be considered a potential #1 quarterback rest of season. You know what the quarterback landscape looks like right now. Patrick Mahomes is not a playable fantasy quarterback. Anthony Richardson is not a playable fantasy quarterback. We've been up and down with Brock Purdy and Kyler Murray and some of these guys that we were expected to have great seasons, and now Baker Mayfield loses his top 2 wide receivers. So getting Tua back, it feels like it's the right time, Dave. Are we going to slot Tua Tagovailoa right back in as a top 12 quarterback?
He's not going to be a top 12 quarterback for me this week against Arizona, but he's going to be close to it. And I look at him as someone who, between now and the end of week 11, somebody who could be a starting fantasy quarterback. It's someone who's got great matchups and certainly great wide receivers, someone who knows the offense. And man, does this Dolphins offense need to get cooking because they were terrible without Tua Tagovailoa. So I agree he should be the #1 name on this list.
He's a top 12 quarterback for me for this week, and I love the upside for what he can become because, man, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle need him back, and this offense needs a spark of what we've seen from them since Tua has gone down. So I'm expecting him to come in and light up this Cardinals defense. Love the setup for Tua Tagovailoa this week. But you also got Russell Wilson coming off a strong game. He's got a good matchup against the Giants. Drake May, back-to-back games with 24-plus fantasy points. And then for those of you in deeper leagues and Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues, you got Jameson Winston now starting most likely for the Browns. You got Gardner Minshew at least for the next 3 weeks for the Raiders, so he can be a bye week replacement. Mason Rudolph could be a bye week replacement. And then don't forget about Marcus Mariota, who's got an opportunity here to step in potentially for Jaden Daniels. Ran for 34 yards, had over 23 fantasy points. Tough matchup against the Bears, but if Jaden Daniels is week to week, Marcus Mariota might also be a bye week replacement for you in Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues as well. That'll do it for us here on the Waiver Wire Takeover. Make sure you check out our Fantasy Football Today podcast, wherever podcasts are found. We are helping you dominate your leagues every day of the week. The Fantasy Football Today podcast.